The moment your pulse stops, the world doesn't go quiet. That's a lie they tell the living. What follows isn't silence, it's invitation. I have always been drawn to stories that shouldn't exist. The kinds of tales whispered between hospital curtains, scribbled in notebooks never shown, or told only when no lights are on. Stories that begin with a flatline and end with a warning. Over the years, I've heard many of them. Most are fragments. Most are buried in metaphors, distorted by trauma or time. But some are sharp, detailed, chillingly consistent. These are the ones I keep. These are the ones I share. Tonight, I will guide you through the threshold, through terrifying place between life and death. And I won't do it alone. I'll bring you voices, real voices. People who say they crossed over and came back, but not all of them returned whole. Let's begin with Carlos, Chapter 1. 8 minutes. DOW, Carlos Avellaneda, was pronounced dead at 3:26 a.m. A car crash in rural Chile. A compact vehicle wrapped around a pine tree. Carlos was in the driver's seat, eyes wide open, body limp. Paramedics attempted resuscitation for over 8 minutes. Nothing, no heartbeat. No response, they stopped. And then, moments later, as they were zipping the body bag, he screamed. The sound was inhuman. A scream like tearing metal. The kind of sound you don't forget. At first, they assumed it was a reflex. The body twitching post-mortem. But his heart restarted. He began breathing. They rushed him to the hospital, where he spent 11 days in recovery. On the 12th day, he asked to speak to a priest, then a psychologist, then a writer. That's when I met Carlos. He was 38, soft-spoken, and refused to be alone in the dark. He told me, without blinking, that he had been somewhere else. Not heaven, not hell. A hallway, he said, with no end. The walls were made of static, like television snow. But inside the static were faces. My father, my teacher. A girl I once hit with a bicycle when I was 6. He kept walking. The corridor had no floor, just a sensation of movement, like being pulled by gravity toward ... something. It wasn't a tunnel. It was more like being remembered by something ancient, like a god trying to recall who I was, and getting it wrong. Carlos said the moment he saw his own reflection, not in a mirror, but in a memory of someone else's dream, was when the pain began. I was being unwound, unraveled, like a sweater, but the thread was my name. And then he woke up with blood in his mouth and the sound of knocking in his ears. Chapter 2. The science of the thin VI. Neurologists have long tried to explain near-death experiences. Oxygen deprivation, brain activity in its final bursts. The mind's desperate attempt to create peace before it shuts off. But if that's all it is, why do the stories match? Why do people from opposite ends of the earth, with different religions, cultures, and beliefs, describe the same things? The tunnel, the light dot, the watchers. And why do some of them return with languages they never studied, or scars that weren't there before? Take Mei Li, a woman from Hong Kong who drowned in a boating accident. She was underwater for nearly 10 minutes. When revived, she began writing symbols that matched pre-dynastic Chinese, a script she had never seen, studied, or even heard of. The symbols described a door of bone, a gate that swung open, not outward, but inward. Into the soul, Mei Li could draw that door with perfect precision, eyes closed, hands shaking. Chapter 3. Cold light. Warm DR cannot. All who die see the light. Some describe darkness, not emptiness, not void. A presence. Julian Cross, a 45-year-old plumber from Kentucky, was struck by lightning and clinically dead for 6 minutes. His experience: a long dining table, seats filled with silhouettes. Every silhouette wore a mask. Paint the fine painted smiles. In front of Julian was a plate, empty. He says they spoke to him without mouths. You came uninvited. You don't eat here, but you will serve. He woke up, screaming, and since then, he hasn't been able to eat meat without vomiting. No medical reason, but every birthday, he receives an anonymous letter. Always the same phrase: when you die again, remember, seat 13. Chapter 4. Children, REMMBR. Children are often the most believable because they don't edit their stories. Sepniero Maria fell through ice during a family trip in Russia. She was under for 5 minutes. When revived, she cried and cried, screaming about the glass people. She described a place where every person was made of cracked glass, glowing from the inside. They spoke without sound and moved like wind in reverse. Maria said one of them told her, "We're not dead, we're just further away." She drew their faces for weeks. Always the same, eyes too wide, mouths sealed shut with twine. Years later, during an unrelated art class, she painted one of them again and titled it Father. Her father died when she was 3. She never saw a photo, but the face matched exactly. Chapter 5. The unmarked paths. There are places in this world where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin. A stretch of highway in Nevada, where drivers see passengers appear in their back seats. A field in Romania where GPS fails, and people vanish for hours, returning with memories that don't belong to them. A house in Quebec where 3 different families reported seeing their own reflections walking independently. The dead are not confined. They leak. They remember us. And when we brush close enough to their world, sometimes we bring something back. Not all stories come from those who returned. Some come from those still listening. They hear the whispers, in sleep, in silence, in static, and some of them, ... Answer back. Chapter 1. The radio that shouldn't, SBA Cajun Hayes, lived alone. In a small apartment above an old bookstore in Massachusetts. She was a quiet woman, early 30s, librarian, no social media. The kind of person you could pass on the street 100 times and never notice. Her story came to me via handwritten letter. No return address, no signature, only this line scratched on the envelope. He still speaks at 3:13. Inside was a journal entry. It began simply. A broken clock radio in her apartment started tuning itself to static every night. Exactly 3:13 A.M. At first, she thought it was a power surge, but it happened even when the radio was unplugged. One night, she recorded the sound. It wasn't static. It was whispering. She enhanced the audio and slowed it down. A voice, male, monotone. You left me behind. Do you remember the tunnel? I remember you. She stopped sleeping. She brought in an electrician, who found no signs of damage or external interference. The voice continued for 7 nights. On the 8th night, the whisper changed. If you don't speak back, I'll come upstairs. The letter ended there. The bookstore is now closed. Her apartment is empty. The radio was left behind, still unplugged, still whispering. Chapter 2. The mirror in the rental cabin. Marcus and Lily. were a newlywed couple from Canada who rented a secluded cabin for their honeymoon in British Columbia. The cabin was simple. No TV, no Wi-Fi. One mirror, ornate and cracked down the center. Lily hated it immediately. Said it gave her headaches. Marcus ... felt drawn to it. On their third night, he began sleepwalking. Always to the mirror. She would find him standing in front of it, unmoving, whispering, "It's warm, it remembers me. It wants in." He didn't remember saying any of it, but she recorded him. The mirror showed something else, while he spoke shadows behind Marcus. Faces watching from just beyond the reflection. By the fifth night, he stopped responding to her. She smashed the mirror, in desperation, and inside the hollow frame was a second mirror, untouched, flawless. That one reflected her standing alone. Marcus was never found. Chapter 3. The elevator that skips Efelo Orison, an old hospital in Sao Paulo, Brazil. There's an elevator that never stops on the 7th floor, even though the button exists. Orderly staff avoid it. They whisper about it. But one intern, Renata Alves, was curious, so she pressed it. The doors opened into an unlit hallway. No lights, no sound. She stepped in anyway. She walked for 12 minutes. No rooms, no end. But she heard breathing. And then, a patient file on the ground. Dated 1957. Her own name on the file. Her birth date, but in the photo. A different face. Older, hollow eyes. Same name. She turned to leave. The hallway was gone. She woke up 4 hours later, back in the elevator, covered in dust. Security footage shows the elevator never moved. The doors never opened, except the camera caught something else, a handprint on the inside of the lens. Chapter 4. Children who draw the dead. A teacher in Warsaw began noticing something strange in her kindergarten class. Children were drawing the same figure, a tall man in black dot, no face, always standing behind them in the picture. When she asked, the kids called him Mr. Hollow. They said he watches them dream. The teacher grew concerned, thought it was a collective story, something from TV. Until one student brought in an old photograph from home, a picture of her grandfather's funeral in 1972. In the background bed, visible was the same figure, identical, no face. The photograph had not been edited. It was verified as authentic. The girl said he still visits at night, sits at the edge of her bed and hums. Chapter 5. The voicemail from beyond. A woman in Chicago received a voicemail from her mother. Nothing strange, except her mother died 3 years prior. The message was distorted, static, breathing, and one sentence: "I can't stay long. Don't trust the nurse with red shoes." She thought it was a sick prank, until her father was admitted to the hospital a week later. He suffered a severe allergic reaction after being administered medication by a nurse with red shoes. Security footage showed she left the building and never returned. Her name, fake. Her ID, blank. The voicemail has been studied. The audio contains frequencies no modern phone could produce. Frequencies associated with old analog radios from the 1940s. The phone company has no record of any call. They say the dead forget us. But what if the opposite is true? Some memories are not ours to hold. Some faces never truly leave. And some debts don't expire, even after death. Tonight, we explore 5 accounts where the dead didn't simply return, they remembered. Chapter 1. The Cemetery WITR in the City of Lyon. France, a small cafe near the oldest cemetery had a peculiar waiter. Polite, quiet, dressed in black with gloves. Locals called him Le Serveur Mute, the mute waiter. No one ever heard him speak. But he never got an order wrong. Not once. He only worked the night shift. One evening, a tourist named Alan visited the cafe after missing his train. He noticed something strange. Everyone else in the cafe was silent, still not eating, just ... Sitting, the waiter brought him a drink without asking. Alan took one sip and passed out. When he woke, he was in the cemetery across the street. The cafe was closed, boarded up, had been for 30 years. He returned at dawn. A homeless man nearby told him, "You're not the first. That place feeds the dead what they miss most routine." Alan found the receipt still in his pocket. It had today's date and his name, perfectly typed. Chapter 2. The Debtors. Rom Sandra, a hospice nurse in Dublin, had a patient named Mr. Kearney. He was 92, dying, delirious, but every night, he whispered the same thing. "Tell her I'm sorry." She asked who her was. He wouldn't say. On his final night, his heart stopped at 3 o'clock, at 3:07. Sandra received a phone call. No number. The voice on the other end whispered, "He never paid. Now you will." That morning, she discovered deep scratches along her hallway walls, like fingernails. Dragging through plaster, every mirror in her home was cracked from the inside. She started seeing a woman's face, reflected in places she wasn't standing. Mouth sewn shut, eyes weeping blood. She quit nursing the following week, and now lives in a house without mirrors. Chapter 3. The Locked Room in the ORP-H&H in Hungary. An orphanage was shut down in the 1980s due to internal misconduct. But one room was never unlocked. Room 19. No child was ever assigned to it. No staff entered. But every night, screams were heard from inside. When demolition began years later, the crew broke the lock. Inside, a bed, untouched, and a journal. Its pages described daily events from the perspective of a child, but there was no child registered with that name. The last entry read, "They say I don't exist, but I remember all of them." On the back of the journal, 27 names were scratched into the leather cover. Each belonged to a missing child reported in the same year. The room was sealed. No bodies were found. But the new building constructed over the orphanage never rents out. Room 319, not since tenants, began waking with children's drawings under their pillows. Drawings they never saw being made. Chapter 4. The forgotten TWI. Neela and Noah were born in a small hospital in West Virginia. But only Eli came home. Noah was stillborn. The parents never told Eli about his twin. But on Eli's 9th birthday, he began talking to someone no one could see. He named him Noah. He said Noah lived in the attic air. Eli described games they played, stories only he knew, events he couldn't have possibly remembered, less he'd shared a womb. Eventually, Eli stopped eating, said Noah told him food is for the flesh. Then, he vanished. The attic was locked from the outside. When they broke it open, Eli was sitting in the corner, smiling, and behind him, written in ash, "Thank you for giving me my name back." Eli doesn't speak anymore, but he still draws, always two boys, always holding hands. Only one has eyes. Chapter 5. The Funeral PHOTOJR. Martin was a freelance photographer in Detroit who specialized in capturing grief moments at funerals, raw, emotional expressions of sorrow. He was known for getting the perfect shot. But at one funeral, he took a photo that changed everything. It was a close-up of the deceased's daughter, weeping. But in the developed photo, the deceased was standing behind her, smiling. Martin assumed it was a glitch. But every funeral after that, more figures began appearing, shadowy, smiling, always watching someone grieving, until one day, at a funeral he hadn't even been hired to cover. The family called him, said there was a photo on their mantle of their daughter's funeral, taken by Martin, but the daughter was still alive. The photo showed her coffin and Martin standing beside it. He doesn't take pictures anymore, but sometimes he receives undeveloped rolls of film in the mail, each one labeled with dates in the future. Death is not a place, it's a process. And sometimes people don't return alone. When we cross the threshold and come back, something comes with us, a memory that wasn't ours, a smell that doesn't belong, a hunger ... that can't be fed. These are stories of survivors who brought back more than scars. Chapter 1. The woman who stopped DREA. Mayanji Isabel Gutierrez drowned for 4 minutes during a rafting accident in Costa Rica. She was resuscitated on the riverbank. Physically, she recovered, but from that day forward, Isabel stopped dreaming. Completely. Doctors said it was stress, trauma, but she insisted it wasn't, that she couldn't dream something was eating them. She began waking up tired, emaciated, bags under her eyes like purple bruises. Then her partner began having dreams, terrible ones, of drowning, of cold hands, of a pale woman with Isabel's voice, but no eyes. She started recording herself while she slept one night. She caught herself whispering in a voice not her own. She remembers the river. She remembers your face. That same night, her partner vanished. Only Isabel's wet footprints were found by the door leading out, never returning. Chapter 2. The child who spoke the old WRD. Northern Mongolia. A child named David Dorj was struck by lightning. He was dead for 2 minutes. When revived, he was silent for days. Then he began speaking in a language no one in his tribe recognized. Linguists later confirmed the dialect was Proto-Turkic, thousands of years old. David Dorj had never left his village, never studied any language, but he wrote poems. Dark, chilling poems, describing a realm where birds have no eyes and the trees bleed memories. He claimed a figure in that realm gave him a word to speak, a word to unlock what's beneath the roots. When he finally spoke that word aloud in front of his family, the ground under their yurt cracked, snapped like bone. And from beneath the earth, they heard something breathing. Chapter 3. The boy in the ATTIC in New Hampshire. A family moved into an old colonial home with their 5-year-old son, Jason. Soon after settling in, Jason began drawing staircases, spirals, endless spirals. He said he climbed them every night in his dreams, but one night he didn't wake up. He was found in the attic, lying in a perfect spiral of salt, his eyes open, unblinking. He was alive, but unresponsive. Doctors called it a fugue state. He remained like that for 11 days. On the 12th day, he sat up and whispered, "It followed me down." They moved out immediately, but every new home they lived in, he found a way to the attic. Always alone, always leaving spiral drawings. Now 17, Jason refuses to sleep on floors above ground level and never walks up spiral staircases. He says it waits at the top. Chapter 4. The Echo Iron Side-Eyed. Alan Resnick, a renowned audiologist, suffered cardiac arrest in his soundproof lab, dead for 6 minutes. When he was revived, he had partial hearing loss, but also new sensitivity. He could hear echoes of voices in empty rooms, not just sound, but conversations. He began transcribing what he heard. "They're coming back in threes. We need more mouths. The one with the white coat doesn't know. All of it." Before it happened, Alan began hearing his colleagues talk in the next room before they entered. He heard his dog's whimper before the storm hit. Then he began hearing his own voice, saying things he had never said, until one night he heard himself whisper, "I'm not Alan anymore." He locked himself in his lab the next day. His hearing aids were found on the floor, still playing sounds of breathing. Chapter 5. The Man Who Slept in 2PL. Iscalind, a security guard in a London museum, had a heart attack during his night shift. He was alone for nearly 15 minutes when paramedics arrived. He was unconscious but breathing. When he awoke, he insisted he had seen the other side of the exhibit, not the back of the museum, something else, a mirror world where the paintings bled. The statues whispered, and he had a room of his own. Every night after that, he dreamed of it. But the dreams got longer. He began waking with dust on his shoes, museum dust, paint on his fingertips, traces of ash. Cameras never showed him moving. But once, a statue had been turned 180 degrees overnight, and Colin had fingerprints on his neck from behind. He now sleeps only during the day, and covers all mirrors in his apartment, because sometimes, he says, he sees himself still walking the museum at night. But it isn't him. Some claim there's a final threshold between this world and the next. But no one speaks of what happens when you walk back through it, backwards. They searched for answers, for closure. But what they found was the truth staring back. These are the last known records, the final accounts, and perhaps warnings. Chapter 1. The girl who walked into the LA Sophia Leclerc was 10 years old when she vanished beside a still lake in the French countryside. Witnesses said she walked into the water fully clothed, eyes open, as if sleepwalking. The water was searched for days. Nothing, until 4 days later. She walked out, dry, silent, holding a flower that didn't grow anywhere near the region. Her family was ecstatic until they noticed subtle changes. She didn't blink, she didn't flinch, and she no longer recognized her mother, but she did recognize the old mirror in the attic. She would sit in front of it for hours, not moving, until one day, her reflection smiled, but she didn't. That night, she was gone. Again, no footprints, no door opened, only a wet outline on the floor, and a word scratched into the glass. Still here. Chapter 2. The camera left in the Mausoluma group of urban explorers in Buenos Aires broke into a sealed mausoleum abandoned since the 1930s. They live-streamed the event. Laughs, graffiti, mockery, until one of them, Rufa, found an old film camera on a pedestal, still intact, still loaded. He took it home the next day. Rufa's friends began disappearing, one by one, each time. A new developed photo appeared in Rufa's living room, black and white, of the mausoleum, of empty coffins, of him standing between them, wearing funeral robes. He tried to burn the camera, but it wouldn't burn. He smashed it and found a roll of film inside Unixpose. Except when he opened it, his own eyes were printed on the strip. Open, staring, forever. Chapter 3. The sounds that beled. A defunct military testing facility in Poland. AUDIO researchers were experimenting with subsonic frequencies, sounds lower than human hearing. What they discovered was a phantom resonance at exactly 11.3 Hz when played. It caused nausea, hallucinations, and most curiously visions of figures in the corner of the room. One technician, Embark, began playing it to himself through headphones every night. He claimed the figures began speaking to him, whispering coordinates, names, memories that weren't his. He wrote in his journal, "They want me to remember what I've never seen. They live in frequencies. We are just interference." The facility was shut down after Embark suffered brain hemorrhaging. His final EEG recording showed zero brain activity, except during playback of the tone. Then his neurons lit up responding to voices. One phrase repeated, "Keep listening." Chapter 4. The house that built ITSEL, in Alberta, Canada. A real estate agent found a house not listed on any registry. No address, no driveway, but fully constructed. Curious. She entered. Each room was built from memories. Her grandmother's kitchen, her ex's living room, a hallway from a dream she once had. The deeper she went, the more unfamiliar and wrong it became. Doors led to rooms that shouldn't connect. Gravity shifted. Time bent. At the center of the house was a spiral staircase leading downward. She left and called the city. They said no such house existed. When she returned, the next day it was gone. Only grass, but her camera had one new photo. A blueprint of a house with her name on every wall, drawn in blood. Chapter 5. The door without a rehemical. A custodian in a Russian university found a sealed door behind a false wall in the basement. It had no handle, just a keyhole, and a strange engraving, an eye with no iris. One night, during a blackout, he heard knocking from the other side. A whisper, "We're here now." He left, reported it. Security laughed, but students began disappearing, always near that wing, and every time someone vanished, the door changed. More cracks. Faint light underneath. Mikhail installed a camera at 3:33 a.m. The door opened. No one on screen, but static burst through the feed. Audio played, "You've always belonged to us." Next morning, Mikhail was gone. His mop was left leaning against the door, still dripping. Final entry. My own shadow Noctum's voice drops to a whisper. I received one last letter. No name, no address, only a single sentence. You told their stories. Now they'll tell yours. I see things now, in reflections, in echoes. Sometimes I wake with words written on my walls that I didn't write. They know I've been watching. They know I've been listening, and they're starting to speak through me. So if one night your screen flickers at 3:33 a.m. If you hear breathing where there should be silence, it's not me anymore, it's them.